Fables, Follies, and Fallacies by Andy Curliss. Again, I mentioned a leader in the swine industry and previously a journalist. Andy is currently the Vice President of Strategic Engagement and sits on the leadership team at the National Pork Producers Council. In that role, he works to engage within and outside of agriculture to advance the U.S. pork industry. Andy.
How's that? Better? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Good afternoon. So I'm going to set up because I'm really not the star of this show. You got two coming after me who are. So I want to kind of level set our time together just with a little bit of the big picture, how we see it outside of production. The need, I want to emphasize the need for, come on in. The need for timely research is urgent, and it's urgent in the areas that I will highlight. And I would just call your attention to the abstracts. And I did put one in on the need for corrective science as good science, and I won't repeat all of that. So where I wanted to start is this, as a level set. This is where most of our research, our interest, our focus is in the firm view of the business. That could be an individual farm, that could be Smithfield Foods, Tyson, whoever. And this is what they care about. And many of you and others, the research, if you walk down this hallway, a lot of it is focused in this box right here, right? Efficiency, production, things to make the business and to meet the need of consumers. Where we sit at the National Pork Producers is a little bit different perspective, and so that sits in the middle, absolutely, but I just want you to be oriented how we see it in this broader space, and it gets surrounded like this. We have politics that leads to policy, and we all know the regulator just follows the policy, the laws as they're written, right? But those are distinct arenas. You have ballot initiatives, which are related to politics, but direct voting, and those are ongoing right now. There's 2 ballot initiatives that would really impact agriculture, one in Denver, one in California. In the legal arena, many of you have watched and seen what has happened in the legal arena, both on the crop protection side with glyphosate, dicamba. A lot of research is finding its way into courtrooms, and it is often one-sided. And then you have the community, that's your social license. You have all of these NGOs, that includes NPPC, we are an advocacy NGO, and then the academic space. You notice I don't put communications on there. That is the connective tissue. A lot of people think, oh, well, you just tell your story and everything will be resolved. It's not as simple as that, but I do want to acknowledge communications, and it's very messy. It looks something like this. As you start to evaluate this overall grid and arena that is surrounding this space. And then, very much related to communications, but different, is where we see research and data. And for the most part, when you get to the farm level, the farmer does not want any data being shared with anyone. But I'm here to tell you that there is a lot of data about agriculture that is being digested and consumed and researched, and it is important for those of us in agriculture to engage in this arena. And it's probably less so if I were to put, it would represent in this way as far as a lot of this research and what have you. So this is an orientation. This is what I call the grid. You may hear me say external grid. In this arena, in this field, we face in agriculture very deep funding in opposition, movement builders and organizing, new coalitions, new antagonists, very well developed campaigns and attacks, and increasing alignment across this external grid. And I would just highlight this and emphasize it, that there is funding, organizing, coalitions, and campaigns aligning across those areas. Some of them you've probably heard of. Here's a representation of that. You've got environmentalists, you have legal, efforts, you have animal liberators, there's media outfits, there's think tanks, and so on. Here's another page of yet more. It's important for us to recognize their mission does not align with our values. Abolish factory farms, end. These are the words that they will use. Dismantle, replace. Those are their stated goals. I like this one. This was a foundation that was focused on human rights in early years, but we are now concentrated on ending factory farming. If you go to their websites, you'll see $15, $35. You can give them $55. I'm here to tell you that these groups do not survive on $35 from somebody in Columbus, Ohio, right? So where these groups are funded, it's important to understand, is from folks like this. This is a screen of all very high net wealth individuals, most of them billionaires, or running foundations that are 8, 9, 10-figure foundations. We don't have time to go through all of those, but I want to give you a taste of that. This here is Dustin Muscovich, co-founder of Facebook and a software company called Asana. Some of you probably have used. And they have, with his wife, Carrie Tuna, a project called Open Philanthropy Project, and they give the money to those groups. Here is just a representation of that. You see 12 million, 12 million, 10 million, 10 million, 8, 6, 6, 6, 5, 5, 5. These are large grants that go to those groups. I just summarized that to update that just here through August. And you can see in the last 8 years, it's north of $500 million, all in anti-farmed animal advocacy. They have increased that. It's now running at about, since the pandemic, $9 million a month. And if you want to see what that looks like on a chart, this is over the last 8 years. That little red is that's my projection on. I think they'll be at 600 million by the end of this year. It's interesting. We support a variety of initiatives to achieve policy change. It is a variety. With any given initiative, relatively unlikely to succeed. We call this hits-based giving. A few successes out of this entire portfolio would be enough. You may have noticed on that list, there's one of the groups, Mercy for Animals. There's $30 million to one group, Mercy for Animals. And they have a research team running research projects. And here they'll work with you, academic researchers, including access to useful data, new avenues of funding, support from our staff. This is catnip for a lot of academics, right? You've got a $500 million pot of money saying, come work with us. Just a reminder, the point is to end factory farming. And so I thought I would take a brief detour just to kind of level set where I sit in this. I like modern agriculture, production agriculture as a word. You'll see them, CAFOs, big ag, large scale, industrial factory farms. Sometimes we forget why factory farms. I like factory farms. I like factory hospitals. My mother was ill last year and needed a factory hospital to help her. I'm glad I didn't have a country doctor coming by. A lot of our children go to factory schools, right? We don't have one teacher teaching 6 grades all at once anymore. And I don't know how many of you have been to the factory grocery store, but we shop at the one called Costco. There's others. We were able to get a lifetime supply of mustard at Costco. They sell it like in a 55-gallon drum. It's amazing. So, just some assurance about, in case you get queasy about factory farms, if you fly, I want you to look out the window and see how we are organized in this country. This is me taking off from my airport, my home airport in North Carolina where I live. That farm at the right does not keep all of those people going above it. Am I right? Okay, I took this picture, Savannah, Georgia. I woke up, that's an apartment building. Those people were eating bacon and they had eggs, but they cannot keep a pig in that apartment building. This is Nashville, Tennessee, Denver, Colorado. I took this one landing at Kansas City. The football stadium is off to the right there. Can you see it? Let me zoom in. There. Got the football stadium. I spend time, unfortunately, in Washington, D.C. There are no farms in Washington, D.C., and I don't know how many of you have been here. That is not Central Farm, right? And so all of those people are going off doing something today because of large-scale industrial factory farming, whatever word you want to call it. And also, it's important to recognize the fruits of this have been to remove large numbers of people from extreme poverty all across the world. And so our focus is on, and always will be, producing affordable food for people who need it. And we're not ashamed of that. So large scale, yes, less land, less water, lower cost, so that folks can do their thing in the cities. And of course, nobody has to have 12 brothers and sisters anymore, right? Okay, and so these folks here, though, have a totally different view. I'll highlight another one. This is Eric and Wendy Schmidt. Eric Schmidt was the longtime chairman and CEO at Google. And they have a family foundation with a project that they call the 11th Hour Project. And as an example, you see here some funding to a group called Food and Water Watch. I don't know how many of you have heard of this one. It's an NGO. And you see 500,000, 1.2 million, 2.3 million. These are large amounts of money that go into these groups, again, with a mission of dismantling us. This is a growing organization now, north of $21 million a year, and they run a research program. Now, it's probably not research like you think of research, and that's one of the takeaways I hope you have is research can mean many things, okay? And it can be very effective in different arenas. They'll do fact sheets, case studies, policy briefings, and so on. They are coming for Iowa right now, so those of you who have an interest in Iowa should be paying attention to what they are pumping out on the Iowa front. But I'll just take you through some of their research reports. Here's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're cranking it out. Just to give you an example, here's the climate footprint of Iowa's factory farms. There's the cover. There's a nice 8-page report with a few charts, 2 pages of citations, including, here's one, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, industrial hog operations in North Carolina disproportionately impact African Americans. That study has been completely debunked by our administrator of the U.S. EPA, Michael Regan, who is also African American, by the way, says that is not true. But that shows you how these things go out, they don't get corrected, and they get cited and recited and recited and recited. And it is important that those of us who care about agriculture engage. Here's their 6 months report. This is 15 new research reports, 24 active lawsuits, using both of those to get, New York Times, Washington Post, and so on. That shows you that alignment across those entirely different disciplines of research, policy, legal, advocacy. And by the way, here's an example of one of their lawsuits. Was just in court last week. My colleague at MPPC in the Ninth Circuit in California fighting this fight. And by the way, it should turn out favorably for us. But this was a petition filed in 2017. What is today? 2024? Right? So we're 7 years in. This ties us up. We have to spend time, money, resources. And when it finally got to court, the Ninth Circuit, which is you probably know a little bit about the Ninth Circuit. Even they were skeptical of this whole approach. And so that one probably will turn out okay, but 7 years and a need for research in that space. You may notice in my grid I had academic. I won't venture too far into the territory of my colleagues who will follow, but so I wanted to go down into the high school level. How many of you have heard of advanced placement courses? If you have a kid in high school, I see some hands going up. One of the measures of going to college is how many AP classes did you take, okay? And your kids who are good with blood and guts and doctoring and veterinarians, they may not end up in this class, AP Environmental Science. They're probably going to be in AP Chemistry or some of those. A lot of the kids that end up in the policy space, this is the one that they take, okay? And I don't know that anybody in agriculture has studied the curriculum of AP Environmental Science. They have sections on agriculture. And you might think that the outcome, the learning outcomes would be, what is the environmental science of agriculture? That is not what the learning outcome is of this AP Environmental Science class. Here you see the learning objective is that the students should come out of this describing agricultural practices that cause environmental damage. That is from the curriculum. That is what they are oriented to learn. And the essential knowledge is that there are practices that include tilling and slash and burn and the use of fertilizers. And that is what the materials follow through on. There's a section on meat production. You'll like this. Meat production is less efficient than agriculture. Does that make any sense to anybody? Well, it does if you understand that the activism that is engaged here wants to separate meat production from agriculture so that they can advocate in that space. I have a say what. Here are some of the materials in this course. CAFOs, designed to pollute. Do you think the engineers who designed CAFOs would agree with that? Here are some of the materials. They teach the kids you have to reduce your meat consumption. Here's the reasons, and then they have the worksheets and they have to follow through. Those of you who care about the crop side, the pest control is no different. There's 5 main learnings. Pesticides kill non-target species, they bioaccumulate, they drift, they pollute groundwater, they're toxic to humans. That's what the children in our high schools are being taught. This week in Iowa, we have a conference. I'm shifting gears now to just highlight another example of this. And you can see it's with Johns Hopkins, a center. It's called the Center for a Livable Future. And they will all gather in Des Moines tomorrow and the next day, where they're going to put out a book. And by the way, this Center for a Livable Future has been very much an advocate against CAFOs, went to the public health, the American Public Health Association, and say they developed their position statement that they adopted, which is a moratorium on CAFOs because it's a threat to air, water, and human health. That is the position of the American Public Health Association. And so now they've put a lot of this advocacy into a book that will be coming out, and there's a conference, much different than our conference here, that will be highlighting the important information from the book. Here it is. And I'm sure it will be assigned reading in many of these college classes. Here's the table of contents. The reason why I'm showing this is just to show you, here's the need. This is the need for research in this space. It's really their table of contents, which is water, air, disease, the community, environmental justice, the law, workers, alternatives, and public health advocacy. They've put together an entire book on it, dedicated to a guy that we have had some interesting interactions with over the year from UNC Chapel Hill, a guy named Steve Wing, who's now deceased. In their telling, there is a growing body of scientific evidence that suggests, aren't these great words, suggests, in all of these areas, health, air, water, ag workers, rural residents, low-income communities, environmental justice, and so on. We don't have time for me to offer the full rebuttal to all of that, but I don't want to leave you thinking that they're speaking about the truth. And so I'll highlight one of the authors, Chris Haney. He is at Johns Hopkins, a very respected institution, and he does a lot of research. Here he is on one of our hog farms, not as a researcher, but as a consultant to trial lawyers who brought lawsuits against hog farms in North Carolina. Do you think he's a dispassionate researcher at Johns Hopkins? Here he is at a conference. Our audio is not going to be very good, but he's sitting at this conference and he starts talking. Hold on, let's see. It might play actually. Let's see what happens. It's okay. He's in the audience, and this guy on the panel on the left is a trial lawyer. And Haney from the audience raises his hand and says, hey, I think there's more that researchers can do to get engaged in all of this challenging big ag. And the quote is, he says to him, what can we get behind as researchers with some tools around new strategies to get at the industry of big poultry? This was a poultry conference. It just, to me, I highlight that to say this is someone who is publishing, who is attending conferences, and will say things like that. You may have seen, if you look up here, packing plant workers, Debbie Berkowitz, associated with Georgetown University. Do any of you remember the pandemic? And have you heard about meat plants in the pandemic? Show of hands. Were meat plants a problem in the pandemic? Yes. All right? Am I right? That was a thing. Probably don't remember that there was this guidance from the federal government. If you work in critical industry and infrastructure, you must maintain your normal work schedule. So why were meat plants a thing in the pandemic? Let me show you. It was a direct result of, actually it was Schmidt, the funder, to an organization called FERN, Food Environment Reporting Network, and they began mapping immediately outbreaks in the food system. They created that. Their model is to make it available to all the other media for free, and they really did push this out and make it a thing through this singular focus on food. They did not map outbreaks at drugstores or the postal system or a lot of other critical infrastructure that was still functioning and serving the American public in that time. They mapped outbreaks in meat plants. And then immediately in conjunction, the policy advocacy and the regulatory advocacy began. And if you go back and look, you will see those in tandem headlines focused on OSHA and others trying to dismantle and end factory farming. This led to a select special subcommittee investigation of the United States Congress with subpoenas. An investigation. And I just want to point out, we're now well into this, so it's easy to look in hindsight, but this was the findings of the Congress. And to be clear, I'm not diminishing the single loss of life in a meat plant or broadly, but these are the facts and the findings of the Congress. 269 meatpacking workers lost their lives. Look at the reference. That was over 3 times higher than what had been estimated by Fern. A blog, okay, became the baseline reference for the United States Congress. And just to make sure you understand the context for this, 269 workers, same time period, 461,000 Americans. It's completely out of context. I like context. I like to try to make context. So this would be, one block is 1,000 units. There's 450,000 units on this screen. There is 250. Okay? And of course, the whole population here I know what you're thinking. Well, what's the whole population? Well, it's America, right? 300. So the whole population, well, there's 32 million, there's 64, 96, 128, 160, 192, 224, 256, right? 288, 320, and there you would find that little blue dot is the meat plants. It's completely out of context, but the direct result of really skilled advocacy, right? And all I'm saying is engage. That led to reports, and again, more hearings and so on. And what is the call to action on this issue right now today? Slow their line speeds. Dismantle, slow them down. We need to stop what they do. And so I will leave it at that with a summary of the research need for agriculture is really the truth. That's in context, the truth. And sometimes that's not real compelling, but it's very important to state it. All types of research is important on many subjects. We've mentioned some of them. When do we need it? Yesterday, and with frequency. And then I would just again point you to that abstract on the heightened need for corrective research as being warranted. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Fowler, and thank you to the National Pork Board for sponsoring this breakout session.